He said stop it. Not because anyone was doing anything wrong. Not because a rule had been broken. Not because the night had turned ugly or the moment had gotten out of hand. He said stop it because he was watching something he hadn't prepared himself to see. Something that made 23 years of managing professional baseball feel, for just a moment, like not nearly enough experience to process what was happening in front of him. The Pittsburgh Pirates manager stood at the edge of the field. His arms were folded. His head was slightly down. And when he finally looked up and saw his young players, his kids, really, some of them barely old enough to have a full season under their belts, surrounding Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts like they had just met their childhood heroes in the middle of a dream they hadn't woken up from yet, he said the only thing he could say. Stop it. He said it quietly. Almost to himself. And then he smiled. This was not supposed to be a soft game. The Dodgers came into Pittsburgh carrying the kind of confidence that makes opposing dugouts tighten before the first pitch is even thrown. They had Ohtani. They had Betts. They had a lineup that opposing pitching coaches lose sleep over in late September when the calendar starts meaning something. The Pirates came in with something different. Youth. Energy. A roster full of players who had grown up watching the very men they were now facing. Who had posters. Who had highlight reels saved on their phones. Who had said Ohtani's name the way a generation says the name of the player who made them fall in love with the game. For 9 innings, none of that mattered. The line between admiration and competition dissolved the moment the first pitch crossed home plate. The Pirates played hard. The Dodgers played harder. The scoreboard did what scoreboards do. But when the final out was recorded, when the handshakes were exchanged and the formalities of professional baseball began to wind down for the evening, something shifted. The mask came off. And what was underneath it was something nobody in that stadium expected to witness. It started with one. A Pirates outfielder. 22 years old. Rookie year. The kind of player who runs everything out and dives for everything because he hasn't yet learned to be careful with his body. He was walking toward the dugout tunnel when he passed Ohtani near the first base line. He stopped. He said something. Nobody on the broadcast caught the exact words. But whatever it was, Ohtani turned. And when Ohtani turned and looked at him, the young player's composure lasted approximately 3 more seconds before it dissolved completely into something that looked a lot like a kid meeting the person he had watched on a screen for the first time in real life. He laughed. Nervous, genuine, unguarded. Ohtani smiled back. That was the moment the others saw it. 2 more Pirates came over. Then 3. Then a group that the broadcast cameras struggled to keep in a single frame. Young men in Pirates uniforms surrounding the 2 men in Dodger blue the way water surrounds anything it finds in its path. Not aggressive. Not performative. Just real. Just young players doing what young players do when the competition ends and the human beings underneath the uniforms remember who they actually are. Mookie Betts was caught in the middle of it before he even realized what was happening. One moment he was exchanging a quiet word with a Pirates infielder. The next moment he was at the center of a gathering that had no official name but felt, to everyone watching, like something that needed one. The opposing manager watched all of it from 20 feet away. Stop it, he said. Nobody stopped. This is where the story changes. Because what anyone might expect in this moment is a polite acknowledgement. A nod. A brief exchange. The kind of interaction that lasts 45 seconds and gets filed under classy moment and forgotten by morning. What happened was none of that. Ohtani looked at the group around him. He looked at the faces. The young ones especially. The players who were barely holding their composure. The ones whose eyes were doing something their voices couldn't quite manage. And he made a decision that nobody on either bench had anticipated. He stayed. Not for 45 seconds. Not for 2 minutes. He stood in that space between the dugouts for nearly 20 minutes. Moving from player to player. Speaking through his interpreter but also, at moments, without one. Using the small shared vocabulary that baseball players carry across every language. Using his hands. Using the universal shorthand of athletes who have spent their lives communicating through the body before the voice. He asked about their swings. Not in a patronizing way. Not in the way a superstar humors a fan. In the way one baseball player asks another baseball player about the thing they both understand better than almost anything else in the world. He watched one young Pirates pitcher mime his delivery and then nodded slowly, like he was filing the information somewhere real. He pointed at the pitcher's release point and said something brief that made the pitcher's eyes go wide. He signed everything. Hats. Gloves. Batting practice balls that appeared from somewhere, seemingly out of thin air, as if the moment had planned its own props. But it was one moment, toward the end of it all, that the cameras caught and couldn't let go of. One of the Pirates' youngest players, a shortstop, called up from AAA just 11 days earlier, had been standing at the edge of the group the entire time. Watching. Not pushing forward. Not inserting himself. Just standing there with the look of someone who is memorizing a moment because they already know they will spend the rest of their life trying to describe it accurately. Ohtani noticed him. He didn't wait for the young player to come forward. He walked to him. He said something. The shortstop responded. Brief words on both sides. And then Ohtani reached out and put his hand on the young player's shoulder. The kind of gesture that doesn't require translation. The kind that says, I see you. You belong here. Keep going. The shortstop nodded. He pressed his lips together the way people do when they are trying not to let their face show everything they feel. Someone on the Pirates side had a phone out. The photograph exists. It will exist for a long time. Mookie Betts was standing nearby when it happened. He watched it. And then he did something that completed the moment in a way that felt almost scripted, except nothing about the entire evening had been scripted. He started clapping. Not the polite applause of obligation. The slow, deliberate kind. The kind that means something. A few Dodgers players nearby joined in. Even a couple of Pirates. The young shortstop looked at the ground, then at Ohtani, then at the small crowd that had gathered around something that had started as a post-game routine and become, quietly and without warning, something else entirely. He sat down in front of the microphone still shaking his head slightly. Not from frustration. From something harder to name. His expression was the expression of a man who had come into this evening prepared for a baseball game and left it having witnessed something that didn't fit neatly into any category he'd used in 23 years of professional baseball. A reporter asked him first about the game. He answered briefly. Professionally. The way managers answer about losses when the loss is not the most important thing that happened. Then the reporter asked about the post-game scene. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He looked at the table for a moment. Then looked up. I told them to stop it, he said. Then a pause. I was joking. Mostly. The room laughed softly. He allowed himself a small smile before it faded back into something more genuine. Look, he said. These are young men. A lot of them grew up watching Ohtani. Watching Betts. They didn't get into professional baseball because they stopped caring about the game. They got here because they never stopped. A reporter asked, were you concerned it was unprofessional? He shook his head before the question was finished. No. I was concerned it would go on so long my coaches would miss the bus. Another small laugh from the room. But unprofessional? No. Not even close. What I saw out there was two men who didn't have to do any of that. They could have walked straight to the clubhouse. Nobody would have said a word. That's what they were supposed to do. He paused. They chose differently. The room was quieter now. My shortstop called his mother from the tunnel afterward. I heard him telling her about it. Kid's 23 years old. Just got called up 11 days ago. He stopped. Seemed to consider whether to continue. Then continued. He said Ohtani put his hand on his shoulder and told him something. I don't know exactly what was said. But whatever it was, that kid is going to be a different player tomorrow than he was this morning. He didn't say anything after that for a few seconds. Nobody asked another question right away. They just let it sit there. Dave Roberts entered the room with the lighter atmosphere of a man whose team had just won. But even he couldn't keep the game entirely at the front of the conversation. A reporter asked him about the post-game scene before he had even fully settled into his chair. He smiled. The genuine kind. Not for the cameras. That's Shohei, he said simply. That's exactly who he is. Another reporter pressed, did it surprise you? How long it went on? Roberts tilted his head slightly. Honestly? No. When I looked out and saw him over there with those kids, my first thought wasn't surprise. My first thought was, of course. He leaned forward slightly. Because that's what people don't always understand about him. The greatness on the field, the home runs, the pitching, all of it, that's one part. But there's a reason this game gravitates toward him. There's a reason those young players didn't hesitate for a second. He paused. He makes people feel like the game belongs to them too. Someone asked about Mookie's reaction. About the applause. Roberts nodded slowly. Mookie has been in this league a long time. He's seen a lot. When Mookie Betts stops what he's doing and starts clapping for a moment, that tells you something about the moment. After the press conferences. After the buses had left and the stadium lights had begun to dim one section at a time. A member of the Pirates ground crew who had been working near the warning track said he watched the whole thing from a distance. He had seen post-game interactions before. Thousands of them over 15 years at this stadium. The quick handshakes. The equipment swaps. The occasional longer conversation between old teammates who hadn't seen each other in months. He said this was different. He couldn't explain exactly why. He stood near the warning track and watched it and tried to find the right word for what he was seeing. He thought about it for a while. He finally said. It looked like the game was being handed down. Not handed over. Not given away. Handed down. The way something is passed from one generation to the next. The way knowledge moves through a sport over decades. Not in press conferences or contract negotiations or highlight reels. But in a 20-minute conversation between the dugouts on a Tuesday night, when the score had already been decided and the only thing left to play for was the kind of thing that doesn't show up in any box score ever printed. The young shortstop who had stood at the edge of the group. Who had waited. Who had been the last one Ohtani walked toward. He was still wearing his uniform when he made that phone call to his mother in the tunnel. He was still wearing it 20 minutes after everyone else had changed. Some moments take longer to leave than others. This one wasn't finished yet.